Good afternoon. Thank you for the advance applause for our distinguished group of CEOs who have a lot of homework to get through after these 1.5 days. We're going to be talking about how they are navigating multipolarity and how they are preparing, or probably are already prepared, for a new world order. And here with me I have Bill Anderson. He is the CEO of Bayer, and he says that his role is to ensure that we drive top innovation to provide better access to health and increase food security. This is our contribution to stability in light of a shifting world order. With us is Roland Busch. He's the CEO of Siemens. He says navigating multipolarity requires our focus on 3 areas: international cooperation to solve global problems, to mitigate risks through diversification, and to keep our innovative strength. With us is also Emma Mascialaglia. She's the CEO and chairwoman of Mascialaglia Holding. Among many things, she was also the head of the General Confederation of Italian Industry. She says, as CEO, I absolutely do not believe that globalization is over. There will be undoubtedly a paradigm shift, but shutting ourselves off is not in anyone's interest. And she also calls for very strong European business policies. With us is also Lars-Hendrik Röller, who needs no introduction, of course, the chairman of the Berlin Global Dialog, economics professor, and as all of us know, for 10 years you were the chief economic advisor to Angela Merkel. So I've spent many years trying to corner him on planes or at events. So it is my particular pleasure to have you on a stage and with a microphone today. He says a new playbook is needed to ensure that the new multipolar order doesn't lead to polarization. That playbook against global disorder should include reform of existing institutions like the World Bank, the IMF, significant funding from richer nations, and for the global south. That's what he's saying. The G20, of course, having pledged $200 billion already. And let's just start us off, and I ask for permission to take a quote from one of those closed-door sessions. Emma, I'd like to start with you. You come from a family company, 60 years old, still global operations that you have, and one quote I was allowed to use is that if you don't want to get into security in this fragmented world, in this new world order, get out of business. Clearly, you're in business. What does a company your size, you have some 60,000 employees, do?
Okay, so first of all, thank you for inviting me. I think this dialogue is really very interesting and very important. So let me just say 2 things. I think, of course, now geopolitical risk is very important for us. Probably in the last 30 years, it was not so important. Probably we have lived in Europe in a situation where we thought that we were like free risk. There was inflation was very low, interest rate was very low. The idea was that probably globalization of the market would also lead to integration of the different states. So we were in a situation where probably the geopolitical risk was not our first, let's say, thought. Then, of course, with and we all work to have the maximum efficiency. So where was the place to invest and to produce? China was the cheaper. Let's go to China. Where was the place to buy my raw materials, maybe hot rolled coils? China. Let's go to China. Let's outsource this part of the thing. Where were the cheapest way to have energy? Was Russia. So we all have done this. And then, of course, we realized that during the pandemic first, and then with the war, that we were all relying too much on China and on. So now what I think a company like my company has to do, first of all, I think it's very important to be the maximum, to have the maximum agility. I don't think we can predict the future. I wish I could. I will be much richer than what I'm kidding, of course. But I think we should be ready to the different scenarios. And And we have to be very agile in adapt to what happened. We don't know what can happen. We can have different scenarios. I heard you saying maybe it's better not to think about the worst scenario, otherwise we will be out of business, but to be agile. So first of all, it's a cultural thing. We have to be very agile. Second, I think we have to do the maximum to diversify. This is what we are doing. Of course, we diversify. We try, because there is a limit in doing that, but we try to diversify other markets, so be more present in different markets. We try also to diversify a lot on sourcing our raw material. We were relying a lot, for example, from Russia and Ukraine before the war. Then we shift completely, and then from China. Then we shift completely to, for example, Vietnam, Korea, Mexico. So you try to diversify as maximum as possible. There's been a lot of discussion here about reinshoring or what. My opinion is that reinshoring your investment once you have done it is very difficult. It's very costly. So probably maybe the next investment, maybe I will not do in China, maybe I will try to do in other countries, but saying that we will exit China, I don't think it's possible, and probably it doesn't make a lot of sense. And finally, I think also that we have to prepare also our people to know better geopolitical risk, because this will stay. I don't think this will go away in 1 year. So, for example, in our academy, we have an academy where we train our people. The first lesson we have done is geopolitics, not only with the first line people, but also with the second and third line people. And I finish saying this, I think, to all CEOs is very clear. We need to de-risk, but de-risking means more cost. So we have to understand how to do it. Is the consumer, are they willing to pay more? So, there is a cost thing that we have to think about it. We have to use more technology. And finally, but probably I think Mr. Kohler will help us, I think also we have to do our own job, but I think also the government and the European Commission has to work with us, otherwise it will be difficult. So probably we need big project to try to diversify where we source our raw material. It will be Africa, we need Kazakhstan, I don't know, but we need to work strongly together. We need, for example, at the level of European Commission and also in state, we need less bureaucracy. We need, this de-risking is costly, it's difficult, so we don't want subsidies or things, but we'd like to have our life simpler, so without stupid bureaucracy that doesn't help us to do this. So, and finally, I think we also would like to have a European Commission to have more FTA. If we have to go and source our raw material, I don't know, from other countries, maybe India, maybe Australia, maybe other countries, maybe we would like to have a free trade agreement where, it's easier for us to go and source. So difficult things, but we'll try to do our own job, but also we need the support from the politics, either at the national level or also at the European level.
So strong call of support there. I'll get to you in a moment, Mr. Röller. Let's turn to Roland Busch. Your company, Siemens, is more than 200 years old.
175.
Oh, okay. That's still pretty good going. It has been a global company pretty much from day one. Actually started in Russia. And what does de-risking mean for you? Does it have to be more expensive? How much opportunity is in de-risking?
Yeah, I think we have to define de-risking in 3 dimensions. Number 1 is the market, in which market we are selling, where we make our revenue. The other dimension is our supply chain, where do we buy? And the third one is technology, because obviously it's a technology, you're depending so much on technology, and you have to think about this one. In particular, in the context of geopolitical tensions, where technology is one of the hot topics, because we believe that there's no political sovereignty without technological sovereignty. And you see that, obviously. Let me start with the first one. And here Siemens has an advantage. Being 175 years old, when Werner von Siemens founded the company, he sent one brother, immediately to Russia and another one to London, because he knew that his technology only in Germany would not survive, so he goes global. And so we are present in almost all countries in the world. And for most of them, for more than 100 years. Now comes the sobering math behind it. 24% of revenue United States, 16 Germany. We are a German company indeed. 14% China. And then it's getting small.
14 or 40?
1-4.
Yeah.
So I was sequencing it. And then it's getting very small. India. For 150 years in India, less than roughly 3%. So just to give a reference. So that means diversification, and we tried hard, I have to say. Also Africa, don't even ask for the number, which is very, very small. And I experienced at least 5 different Asia strategies in my board membership of Siemens. So therefore, it is really hard to diversify, but you have to do that and start working on even harder. So what we did, I mean, we won a huge order in India, another one in Egypt. So we are getting there, but again, it's difficult. And we are not alone. If you start fresh from zero, I think it's even harder. Second dimension, supply chain. Where do we buy? So we studied intensively what is the flow of goods between Europe or Germany and China, China and Europe and United States and China. Very interesting, which is marginal. So can't even forget it. But then, and which is good news is, since we also have a very strong presence, also in manufacturing and the like. So we have, let's say, United States, China, Europe. It's 85, 87% local for local. So it's a very small portion what we are trading. Still, you have to look, are there parts in there which is single sourcing? Because then it doesn't help, volume doesn't speak. So this is where you have to work on. And coming to your point, this costs. If you have a single source, because of cost reasons, and now you go for double source, obviously this increases your cost. Brings me to technology. This is very difficult because it's out of our control. If you have an export control kicking in, let's give the example of the United States controlling the development of semiconductor business in China. So they are having limitations. We are, by the way, have a very strong software business. We are amongst the largest software companies in the world. Nobody knows that. But we are also designing semiconductors. We have tools to design semiconductors. So if you get some kind of limitations there, what do you do? And that's a dimension which is to some extent out of our control. What we do is obviously we try to develop also technology local for local. We have 20 R&D hubs in India, 10,000 active patents there, and so on. But when it comes to software, you normally don't want to fork it and develop it twice, just want to scale it. But now we are forced to do something like that, or we are at least thinking about it. So this is the whole dimension. If you ask me, yes, it will increase our cost. This is the reason why I'm saying there's an embedded inflation in our economy because this diversification, this over-optimization for going incremental investment and wherever it's cheap is over. Yeah. And therefore this embedded, and another embedded inflation is the energy transition, because we are shifting from a CapEx-based system, I mean, build a cheap gas-fired power plant and pay for the gas, to a CapEx-based system. They invest a lot at the beginning, and then the OpEx is basically zero. This means it increases our cost, at least for a while. And that's embedded in our system. We have to take it. This is a price we have to pay, rightfully so, but we have to adapt it. And at the same time, we have to mitigate the risks. So therefore, it's very complex. Very last sentence on it. I mean, to some extent, I love it. Because whenever somebody builds a new plant, it's eventually our business, because we are automation and digitalizing plants. And this trend of diversification, what does it mean? It means new greenfield plants, for example, in the United States. If you build a new greenfield plant in the United States in a market which is aging and we have less and less labor, guess what we would do? Go as far as possible with automation and digitalization. And that's our play. So I love it.
When you describe this, it looks like a world of opportunity, but we're talking about the multipolarity and also the political fragmentation that we're seeing. So how are you factoring in that risk?
So, I mean, to some extent you can, obviously, and we're preparing for that in this local for local. Local for local is always good, I guess. This is something what you really want to think about it. We cannot do that for all markets, but at least for certain regions. We are very worried about any kind of trading barriers which are increased, because the only thing about, and again, we are ending up, as you said, we are ending up not in a globalization is not over. Again, no. In contrast, we are ending up in an even more global world. Yeah. Which is fine, which is absolutely fine. But if at the same time we're starting to put up trading barriers, then we have another problem, and we should avoid that. You can start planning for this, that you say, okay, you have to price in, which drives you more into local for local. And again, as you said before, planning for the worst is something which is extremely hard to do. I mean, I said it yesterday evening, these 800-pound gorillas, which are fighting for the number one position, if that's really getting sour and you have a trade problem, here we're talking about $750 trillion of trade. I mean, if that's impacted, then we have another problem. I don't believe that any risk management gives a good answer to that. So you have to stay tuned and agile and do your homework, whatever you can do.
Bill, Hendrik has spoken before about that that decoupling must not happen. De-risking must not turn into decoupling. How much sleep do you lose over that?
It's a worrying topic because I think there are people talking about the end of globalization. First off, I think that's simplistic. I think there is certainly an era that's ending, and we're passing into a new era. I think there was an era of a sort of an easy monolithic globalization. What I mean by monolithic is you could produce something in one geography and then sell lots of it in some other geography. It was sort of simple, and it was like a race, and it was easy because you could just decide you were going to go into country X next year, and then you could be there, and then you're just selling stuff you're already producing in your home factory, and then okay, maybe you got to open a factory there, but that's not so hard. The simple fact is, if you stop and think about it, there's no decoupling that can happen in any reasonable time frame. I mean, for example, our company, we have 91,000 suppliers in 83 countries, and if we went to say, well, we're going to get out of country X or we're going to get out of country Y, I mean, it's first off, there's no path to actually doing that because the obstacles, you wouldn't want to do it. The first thing you would do, if you said you're going out of country X, that means, so you're going to forego the business opportunity there? You're going to turn your back on the people of that country? That's very challenging. And so obviously in recent, due to recent events, there's been a kind of a big move out of Russia. And that's caused a lot of disruption, but that's a relatively smaller thing than what we're talking about with, say, China. Okay, it's a whole different deal. So you could say that sounds very bleak. Actually, I find hope in it because let's not forget. I know for several decades there was an emphasis on trade as a means to peace. We shouldn't let a tragic development in Eastern Europe dissuade us from the notion that trade can drive peace. We have the West and the East have so much at stake on this in terms of the welfare of the people of every country, and so I think in terms of what we do about it, I think we have to drive forward with two things. We have to be more nimble, as you said. Agility is key because we have to be ready to adapt. We have to be ready if there's a crisis, if there's whether it's a natural disaster or an act of mankind. We have to be ready for that, and we have to have less bureaucratic, more nimble companies. And I think people are waking up to that. I think we also have to take advantage of the opportunity that multipolarity affords to have new voices at the table. For example, we're the world's largest agricultural inputs company. Our number 2 country in the world is Brazil. And, we have an opportunity there with more voices at the table to find reason, to find reasonable ways to get over the big obstacles between the giants. And I see multipolarity as an opportunity to solidify the ties that can bind us together that can prosper the people of the world and hopefully also be a part of keeping peace.
So, Hendrik, we have Emma saying it will get more expensive, we have to factor it in, but we need stronger policies from Europe. We basically have Roland Busch saying it's a question of how you deal with it, and there's a lot of opportunity in this fragmentation as well, as long as you keep it local. And then there's another voice saying it's basically a world of opportunity, which raises the question, why are you so concerned?
No, I'm not concerned, but you might expect that from somebody who's been there in the last 10 years in a different time. We are in favor of trade, in favor of globalization and multilateralists. And that was, by the way, for Germany, all very, very good. And then there were up and downs on that. We had the financial crisis, we had COVID, and many challenges. But then something more important happened, at least for Germany, and that was, the total, miscalculation on our energy policy with Russia. And, with hindsight, that was not good. And now we have a big debate, and then we have the China story, with the China strategy, and now we're having all these discussions about, which is good, about de-risking and security, and it's being pushed more in other countries than maybe in this country, especially the issue with China. There's bilateral support on that in the United States. And I think all of that is correct, I guess, because obviously there are risks, national security or energy, all kinds of risks, which maybe politics didn't see coming and didn't price into their policies, and we now are starting to do that. And that's why everything is going to be more expensive, because it's not going to come for free. It's going to cost economic growth to some extent. Innovation is the answer then, I guess. And all of that is a good thing. And I don't think that's going to go away either, the way the world is going. And now there's a new word out there, multipolar, which is not multilateralism. I mean, the German Chancellor would have always said multilateralism before. Now it's multipolar, and that is a correct description. And I think now and I think what the Chancellor was, I think, very eloquently saying yesterday in many things. Also the question, by the way, on anti-dumping procedures with China, there was a question on that as well, is how do we deal with that? And my worry is, like always in politics, and now I can say this, is you have to be very careful of not overreacting to certain things. You saw that in the COVID crisis, and maybe companies have the same issue. We didn't have enough masks, then we had too many masks, we didn't have enough injections, then we have... So I think these people who've been always sort of against globalization to some extent for social reasons, which we've had all the time, of course, they're now getting more popular, and the question is, how do the politics... So I think when you go through all the trade policy issues, the investment policy issues, the China strategy issues, the voice of business, by the way, is key in all of that. Let's not throw out the baby with the bathwater, and I think that's what you're all saying. And I hope that this is where we're going. The second point, so you can go all these policies, I think we need to find the right equilibrium. And it's going to be difficult, by the way, between the United States and Europe to agree on many of these things, and even sometimes inside Europe, as President Michel was alluding to yesterday. So that's my concern. But the second point really is that let's not push the confrontation. And there's always, when we were dealing with your former president, Donald Trump, on a potential trade war with Germany, auto tariffs, and we were always, trying to talk to him, which was not very easy, by the way, reason with him and try to, get a sensible solution. And others told me, you guys, he only understands one language, you got to hit him with something. I'm not sure we would have been able to hit the United States with anything, because, Germany is totally dependent on the United States, which is from my
And
point
China.
of view, okay.
Which
But also the United States, but that's okay. I don't think we should de-risk from the United States. But the point is, we can't really. So there was always these two strategies. One is, and this is what my former boss was doing, if I may say this here, trying to cooperate and trying to find a good solution versus being tough. And this is, if you want, let's not confront too much. Let's try to, have a sensible political solution and call it a dialogue or something. Those are two worries. Not going overboard, and the voice of business is important. The second one, let's work with China on certain areas, let's say, and not just confront and escalate and end up in any kinds of economic wars.
I would like to make a comment because we talk about our, let's say, naivety depending on gas and Russian gas, energy supply, and which is true to some extent. I mean,
I didn't say naivety. I said
no. I said it, but whatever. I mean, maybe people argue in this direction, and we benefited again from it. No, but what's even more crazy is that 90% of the high-performance power chips coming from one place and one country and one company in the world. So, and without those, you can go to your basement, dig out your latest iPad, which there will be no large language models, no data center. So this is a dependency, I would say, which is much more insane than
Taiwan I'm talking about.
Yes.
Taiwan, TSMC. Yes, this is the one. And the other 10% or 8% coming from South Korea. So.
Okay, but that launches us right into what trade policy should do. And we have here in Germany, for instance, we have individual cases. We have Intel coming to Magdeburg. We have a conversation with companies and also a German chancellor who said he would continue to do this on a case-by-case basis to create incentives for investment on these key industries. To just juxtapose the United States, you have the CHIPS Act, you have the IRA. So what do you feel more comfortable with before I take this back to Hendrik? Which is a more viable strategy for you?
So, I mean, if we look at what the United States are doing, first of all, let's say that probably for the first time, the United States decided to have an industrial policy, because before there were more trade war. I mean, Trump started with, with steel, saying for the 232, steel is national security.
Still there, by the way.
It's still there, so we're trying to. So it's not only Trump; it's going on with Biden. So just to say, but anyway, so they at a certain moment they understood that also they rely a lot on China, that they understood very clearly that China wanted to become a big leader on everything, on technology, on geopolitical and that. And so they decided to say, okay, now we want to have industrial policy. And as you know, as you said, the IRA, the CHIPS Act, the Infrastructure Act, and it's a big thing. It's 1 trillion euro. But the interesting, well, there is a problem there, in my opinion, that, as you know, part of it require local content. So you have to go and produce there. You have to have 40% of raw materials there. So it's a little bit
German car makers are very aware of that.
But from a point of view of the business, I think having a clear tax credit on OPEX and on CAPEX, and you know exactly what you will have. And there is no, as the European Union said, well, let's look at this project. Maybe this project is fine, this project is not fine. So there is immediate, it's tax credit, you take it. And I think if I look at the number, maybe you know the United States better than I do, but I understand that the IRA is working. A lot of companies, also European countries, are going there to invest there. So in my opinion, apart from this local content that I don't like very much because it's a little bit protectionist, but the way it works, it's very efficient. It's very efficient because you know what. In Europe, Europe has done different things. So we have the Green Deal, we have the CHIPS Act, we have other. But first of all, they are not connected all together. They are not on all the value chain like it is in the US. And as you said, it's a little bit. The political level is deciding, intermediating the thing. So my opinion is that the most automatic and clear and immediate is the incentive, the better it is. So that's my point.
What's your takes on that?
Well, I think that, how would I say, businesses are much more drawn to an opportunity. That's how we're wired. Than we are motivated to kind of thread through bureaucratic loopholes and rules. And so, if one country thinks, let's say the goal is renewable energy, and one country puts in tax credits for renewable energy R&D, tax credits for renewable energy installations, et cetera. And another country puts in a bunch of rules saying you can only have this kind of power and you can only have this kind of plant and you can, right? Well, guess where the capital's going? The capital's going where the opportunity is, not where the rules are. Yeah. So this is, this experiment's been run. And so, for example, in the US now, there's a 21% corporate tax rate. Germany is almost 50% higher than that. That's a problem. It's not that complicated. Companies, in some ways, companies are very complex, but the economic opportunities are relatively simpler to understand. And so I do think that creating incentives is a much more potent thing than rules. The second thing I would just say is that's maybe on the government side. On the company side, innovation is sort of an instrument for all seasons. If you've got the same technology as your competitors, then you're competing on price. If you've got the best technology, you have a different opportunity. And so I think there's the leading countries and the leading companies are going with incentives, positive opportunity, and innovation. So I would stick with it.
Before I come to you, I just want to say one thing. I mean, I'm very much aware that we have a very distinguished audience here, so we want to get your questions onto the stage. This is the first set of not behind closed doors with so many CEOs, so please come to this speaker's corner here. The gentleman will give you a microphone, and I would love to bring your questions into this conversation. And Roland, please, I would love you to tell us the example about the global gateway that we discussed.
Oh, well, very quickly on the former question. I would answer it in 3 dimensions. Number one, a government has to decide on critical infrastructure. What is it? And have your hands on. I mean, communication, energy, and transport. I mean, and here we have a discussion. You have to be damn sure that this is up and running in all cases. So,
and it has to be practical.
Absolutely.
It can't be based in dreams.
No, but it has to be in a way that you say what kind of technology you allow to go in order to be setting safe, first point. Second point, what a government has to do is talking about dependencies, which are critical. Let's meet critical materials, for example, raw materials on the one side, or let's take semiconductors. Do we want to have a dependency on these core technologies? And here, I believe the government, if you have dependency where a company cannot pull it off alone, let's say securing, for example, raw material for whatever stuff you have. I mean, none of the automotive can do it alone, not Siemens, nobody. So we have to get together and secure it. And semiconductor, if we have made a mistake in the past, so somebody has to stimulate it. And I think it's right so to put money in it. You cannot do it for everything. You have to be very, very careful. And then don't do it for commodities. Don't do it for commodities where you can source in different places. That's fine. And then the last point is, and this is now industrial policy, a government has to decide where is our USP? Where's our role in the market in order to develop a proper economy, which is growing in GDP while using less resources? And this is more about creating an industry-friendly or innovation-friendly environment to prosper. So these are the 3 dimensions I would put in place. So, well.
Can I pick up with you there? Yeah?
No, just reacting to that, I think on the dependency issues, of course, that is becoming very important. One interesting question is also, you don't want dependency either as a company. So I think the government should take into account also how much self-interest you have. I guess the answer would be it's not enough because you alone, maybe you can't do it, or because you don't want to depend on a monopoly either as a company. So I think you also have an interest not being dependent and need to work together, and maybe the government needs to put a bit more regulation and coordination on it to extend on the natural dependency you would have as a company. Maybe we were relying too much on the first one before, and now we're in a different world and government needs to be more active. I think on the incentives, I think what Michelle was saying yesterday, and I think what worries me is there's positive and negative incentives. The US is all of or subsidies or taxes, if you want. And we are very much in Europe, not on the positive side, but that's your point, but on the negative. So the ETS trading system, that's a tax, for example. So we are more on the negative side. US is more on the positive side, which is bad, as you say, for Europe. The second problem, however, is also that in terms of the way we are administering it, we are doing it through the state aid rules, which are very complicated. We're discussing also with Edi Rama today for Albania, whereas the US is doing it very easily just with a simple tax credit. So both of these whammies, I think, hurt to some extent Europe. And then on top of it, we also often regulate things. Actually, that's a question we could be asking also the next distinguished speaker, actually. And not even going through the market, not positive or negative, but actually regulate things, not in letting the market decide, which is a third whammy, I think, for Europe. So I think
probably
difficult.
As Mario Draghi said, we would need a kind of fiscal union to finance, not to finance, from the northern countries, the poor, stupid, the southern countries. I'm kidding, of course, but to put together a fiscal union and invest in the big projects. Right? That's probably what this is my opinion on, because on the energy transition.
This is very Italian.
No, it's not only Italian. It's also France.
She did say in advance that
it's also France. It's other. But
that's right.
It's but it's not, because I think just let me say this because I think it's important. In the past, the idea was let's make a kind of fiscal union to redistribute money from the northern countries to the southern countries. This is not what Europe needs. I don't think this is. The real thing is that now we have big things coming from outside, right? We have, digital, we have energy transition. So probably if, only Germany or only, another Sweden go on with that, and the other countries don't go on that, but this is also for defense. At the end, Europe will not have a strong position. But I don't want to open this. It's a very difficult position, but it's not me, it's Mario Draghi, so it's not.
But, and forgive me as the sort of non-European here, but it wouldn't occur to me that the answer would be fiscal union to this particular problem, because, for example, if you look at American states, some of them are very strong in one industry and another is very strong in another, which is also true in Europe. And so if you see a strategic deficiency, I don't see why, one European state can't tackle that. I mean, look at, you gave the example of Taiwan. I mean, what's Taiwan? 29 million people or some such number? This is a very small country.
Yep.
So I would be concerned that if you go the route of, wow, it's got to be something that's going to be agreed in Brussels, you've made it so complicated to get there versus just the independent action of the various states.
But the IRA has been done with federal money in the US. It's not
true.
The single federal state, single state.
It's true, but it's also, it's light compared to what I would imagine as a European effort to, shore up an industry.
It's 1 trillion. It's not very low.
No, when I say light, I mean light touch. It may have it may have a lot of ammunition, but it's, the way it gets applied is from incentive standpoint. So worth thinking about.
I don't think we're going to reform the way Brussels works at this table, but I would still like to ask you, Roland, to tell the example of when there is a joint strategic interest, like Global Gateway, to give your example of why, of projects that don't fall under that because of the way policy is delivered.
Okay, I'll try the short version. No, what we are talking about is actually this huge Egypt project, which actually the government, our government and Siemens pulled it together with the collaboration, obviously, with our customer or the Egyptian government. This is an 8 billion project, which is 2,000 kilometers of railway line, including high-speed commuter and freight, so locomotives, which touches out of the 110 million people, 90 million people, east, west, north, south, which is transformative. And I do believe that this is a very good example of not only creating a huge project in Africa, which is transforming a country, hopefully make it more stable. Once you have infrastructure, houses will be built and then you're connecting. So this is very good. Stabilizing, creating opportunities and jobs locally. Think about immigration and so on and so on. So there's a lot of benefit in it. Even not talking about bringing a European signaling technology to Africa, which is also of our interest. Yes. So therefore, there's a lot of positive things. So then, shifting gears now, talk about Europe. They tried it all the way long with Global Gateway. I don't know what the name of the former program was, but it's just, we say the alter Wein in neuen Schläuchen. So it's basically the same.
Repackaged policy.
Exactly. And then look at the list. It's small. No? It's not really visionary to say let's go for another one. And this is. But here comes my point. It would be still intrinsically difficult because if you would apply for such a project out of Europe, then you immediately have two competitors. We have a friendly competitor, Alstom, who would apply for the same one, so it would be damn difficult. No? So therefore, I was quite happy that we could pull it off together. But still, we need an answer to do that because these are the kind of projects which we need in order to make really a difference also to the southern hemisphere and really where we can also make a difference in terms of how they develop without using the same amount of resources which the northern country are using in order to grow.
And this, of course, against the backdrop of the failed merger, which didn't go through because of Brussels. So I'm just wondering, Hendrik, are we talking about very old problems here that are facing a new fragmentation in the world, or how, from a distance now, has this changed?
No, it does. It did change, and everything is changing all the time. I just want to connect our discussion a little bit back to the question of multipolarity. We were talking about incentives and investments, and we do it one way in Europe. You do it very differently in the United States. And it leads to very different issues in those countries. And by the way, besides the competitiveness issue, which obviously you are concerned about in the long run is important, the supply side, there's also the social dimension to that. So when you're talking about introducing, for example, carbon pricing in Europe, and we are doing this in Germany, and it's not a good time right now, the prices are high anyways, you have the competitiveness issues, but you also have the social issue because people have to pay for higher price for energy, and both of those you have to solve. And you can also explain, by the way, some of the U.S. because whenever you give subsidy, you don't hurt the people, and they are the voters, and therefore it might be a very smart way to spend taxpayers' money. And as long as you can borrow the money from the market, and you're having a big debt in the United States, but you have the dollar, that makes sense from your point of view. Europe is in a very different situation. On top of it, we're not one country. But the point of multipolarity is we always had those problems before, but when you now also on top of it put all the geopolitical tension and the zero-sum thinking rather than the cake is growing thinking, which is not the innovation, but the zero-sum thinking, dependencies, and then the danger of fragmenting that is even higher. So I think even if you have a multipolar world, which I think the Chancellor is right, and we have it, we need to make sure that these policies make sure there's a level playing field and that we are working well together on some of these economic. So putting the two things together, having a fragmentation in the approach, which is also what Tim Höttges was talking about very correctly and also emotionally almost, right? And then on top of it, you have the geopolitical multipolar world. It sort of gets even worse. And therefore, given that we cannot change the geopolitics, perhaps, let's not overdo it. Let's be pragmatic. Let's keep working together. Let's dialogue, not us, but the politicians, right? But let's also make sure on the economic policies we don't fall into the zero-sum game, but we have a sort of harmonized level playing field approach, at least within the West. And last point, the climate club of Olaf Scholz, which he's been pushing, is exactly that kind of thing. He says, look, let's have those countries think about a CO2 price, have a level playing field within it. And that kind of thinking is, I think, so the answer would be, I think what Olaf Scholz says, we are in a multipolar world, but let's at least within that work together well.
I just want to have a quick check whether we have a question or a student asking a question at this very moment in time. It doesn't look like that, but I really would like to encourage you because
no question.
we have all the ingredients here actually to come out with a policy paper at the end. Yes, the gentleman there.
Now we have a question.
Yes, now
Noah
we have
Barkin.
a question.
No, it's
Noah,
not Noah
please.
Barkin.
You would have to go over to the speaker's corner, please.
If you would have known.
Noah Barkin from Podium Group.
He has to work to get his question.
Thank you. Noah Barkin from Rhodium Group and the German Marshall Fund. I wanted to push back gently against this multipolar world idea that we've been hearing a lot lately, also from Chancellor Scholz yesterday. I guess the question is, from my point of view, that we have two big geopolitical heavyweights in the world at the moment. It's the United States and China. One can envision a world where India, Brazil, other countries develop, and the world becomes more multipolar. But at the moment, is it fair to say that we have a multipolar world? Or are there two poles in the world, and we're moving in the direction of multipolar? Thank you.
Actually, I would like each of you to say it's pretty much a yes or no question. What your take is on that?
I don't believe it's a yes or no, because size-wise, economy-wise, it's a yes. I mean, and if you ask me, when I make my strategy, if I get it wrong in either of these two countries, I can forget about the rest. It's very easy. So this is, from that perspective, you're completely right. If you talk about dependencies and the leverage we have in dependencies, it's not. When think about it, there will be no, coming back to the semiconductors, there will be no semiconductor built without collaboration of European companies, Netherlands, Germany, Japan, United States. Therefore, there's a dependency and there's a leverage behind that. So size matters, but not only. At the end of the day, I would say it is a multipolar world, but in a real definition of saying it's not only the weight of dependencies, but also of economic weight. From that perspective, you're right. And there's a reason when I'm coming back and saying it would be great to have the third 800-pound gorilla in the room, which is 450 million people, which is Europe, would be one market where we don't measure ourselves according to what is my market share in all of these 27, and if it's too big, then I cut you down or don't allow you to merge or buy companies. This is not going to happen in others. So there's a reason why startups, if they choose, where would they go? They go either to China, if it's maybe less on data, or if they're more embedded there, or they go to the United States, because it's much, much easier and faster to scale its one market.
Yeah, if I may, I totally agree with him. I think, of course, the big thing is US and China, but also we have to consider the other part, and of course we need a stronger Europe. But let me say one thing on US-China. I think there has been a lot of debate here in these days. I think, of course, as Mr. Kohl said, if we go to a strong confrontation, we are already not far from there, but probably we still can do something. This is detrimental for all. And probably here, I think also the voice of business could sometimes we are not heard from our politician, but I think we all say here that a stronger confrontation between US and China is detrimental. It doesn't make a lot of sense. So of course, there are things that are not working, and there are things that we don't like that China is doing. But I think we should try to say to our, government and politicians, there is a confrontation. We know we are competitors. In some things, we are also, strong competitors. But let's try to take it to stay in a situation where we don't go too far, because if we go too far in this confrontation, I think at the end it is detrimental for all of us. This is my point.
Okay. Yeah.
Just so my answer, Noah, that's a great question. If you look at economics and military, you got the two big elephants. But the world is not. There's also institutional. There are other issues. For example, in the EU, it's not only the big economic, but it's actually other countries also have voting power in that. When I negotiated the G20, there was a Latin American view. Pedro was the Sherpa from Argentina. There was a bit of that view. There was an African, view, and African is now part of. So there are political spheres which are not just economic. Demography. There's size and other kinds of things. So I would think that in a world where institutions matter, and I hope the rule of law matters, and I hope it does, it's not just economics and military. So in that sense, even though Noah, I think it's a good point, my view is it's actually multipolar, and when I negotiated in the G20, it was clearly multipolar. It wasn't just US and China.
Would you like to add, or I'll get to... No, you're good. Okay, then we have another question here, please.
Hello, thank you so much. Good afternoon. My name is Emmanuel Richard. I'm with Yale University. And you've all made fairly passionate appeals for lower taxation, deregulation, more industrial policy. But of course, those don't happen in a vacuum. At least, ideally, policymakers should, at least in part, be driven by a popular mandate. And where do you see the responsibility, maybe also of business leaders, to communicate those priorities or to communicate those ideas to a public that is skeptical, oftentimes, of industrial policy, of big spending? The IRA, for instance, is not just subsidies. A lot of the subsidies are delivered through tax credits that do not show up on a budget explicitly, of lower taxation, but also how do you communicate the benefits of deregulation when a lot of people distrust big businesses, distrust large conglomerates and corporations?
Yeah, I think we're moving into a new geopolitical era. We're also moving into an era where very different expectations are being placed on corporate leaders. And, we accepted in the 80s this notion that the primary purpose of a company was to simply make the most money possible. And that's gone today. I mean, there's certainly a very important need to deliver for shareholders. I mean, that doesn't go away. But I think we feel this from every direction, whether it's regulation, whether it's sort of ESG requirements, whether it's from many shareholders that have gotten interested in these topics, but also the young workforce. Do you know, like, we have some students in this room, and we have a lot of parents of young people, and I don't see the brightest, the best young people today getting out of college and queuing up for a job to climb the corporate ladder. Do you know? They want a job with impact, and this is I think this is an obligation for society, for companies to have a clear mission that how are we adding value to the world in the way that is the least harmful to the environment and is the most conscious of the overall needs of society. I think we can thrive with that. I don't think that's a formula for bad financial performance, but it is a change, and I think that's that's a direction we've got to move in.
If I may, thank you for the question, because I think it's important. Today we were asked to talk about, of course, what does it mean to have this multipolar world, how to change to the risk. So of course we talk about that, but I think it's maybe we have to communicate better. But I think all of us as business, we are commit ourselves strongly, for example, on energy transition. We are doing much more than what has been done in the past, and we are very serious on that. It's not just we do that because we have to do it. It's because, as you said, we want also to have, a good impact on the world. And as you said, I mean, these things on stakeholder is very important. We believe in that. So I think probably we need to communicate better, but we are doing this in a very strong way. We are committing for energy transition of all these things. What we want to say is that at the end, also politician has to. I think there is a need of more transparency, because when we say we need energy transition, then we also have to understand how to deal with supply chain, with the critical raw material, how to do. Also, the idea is we believe in that, but what we want to do, since we know that part of the solution is on our strategy, we want also that is clear, that has to be clear to the people that there are consequences. So if we want to do the electrical vehicle, we have to find a way to have the critical material not from China, but maybe from other parts. If we want to be serious on renewables, we need more investment in energy. So the idea is that we want to commit, we want to do our part strongly. The simple thing is we are saying we have to work all together, because it is difficult to do all these things together, and we need to cooperate all together. So that's, I think, what we need to do.
I also appreciate the question, because it raises the question also of just transition, which we don't really have time to get into a lot of detail. But in terms of as a company that is so global like Siemens, that is very much investing in infrastructure, or you're the go-to place, how do you balance the requirement of don't lose jobs in Germany, invest heavily in Africa, or find investors to make sure that the infrastructure is built there? So I'd just be curious to get some insight from you on that.
I mean, it's about, at the end of the day, it's about, I'm always saying, serving 5 stakeholders, which is our customers, which is our people, which is the environment, the society as we're working in, and of course, our shareholders. So this balance I have to find, and at the end of the day, the answer is very simple. If I stay tuned and be one of the most innovative companies, technology companies, serving our customers better, make them staying relevant, then I do a good job. So which brings me back to your question. And this is where I try to make my capital allocation. Is it organic or inorganic development, driving to the next level, have a competitive edge? And also, if we talk about organic development, I mean, we announced our 2 billion investment strategy, which is, for example, we invested in an expansion of a plant in China. And a day later, I was in Singapore talking about investing 200 million in a new plant in Singapore to serve the ASEAN and the Indian market. We invested 200 million on the East Coast in a rolling stock plant for the United States. 500 million went into going to go in the industrial metaverse plant in Germany, in Erlangen, where we believe we have, number one, the right people. We're doubling down on a very successful team and business there. And this is very important, we have the ecosystem around us, which is our customers, universities, the small and medium-sized enterprises. So there's a reason for it. And I do believe in the innovative strengths of Germany still. But we have to measure ourselves against the United States and China, which is moving very fast. Where we did, and I come back to the question, where we did not communicate good enough was in Brussels, because in order to get proper and meaningful regulations, because, and now I have to say that, if you talk about let's just take the AI Act, the European AI Act, this is just overdoing and really limiting the way how we can innovate on new technologies. This is so sharp that it even applies for normal software, which doesn't have to do with AI. And it limits our opportunities to really innovate. So that's a topic. I blended in my complaint about regulations a little bit.
We very much look forward to that. And with that, we also look forward to our next debate. I've been told that the German Trade Minister is already in the house. I would like to thank all of you. I think we certainly have a to-do list for future policymakers. As a former policymaker, are you happy to be back in the economist's role of advising and...
No, I'm very happy. I just wanted to say the question, I think, was very good in terms of communicating, because I do think that the role of business, your points to the general society, also in this country, you know, is not really done as much as you could be doing in terms of public communication. And it's a different panel, I think. But a lot of other interested people are very vocal and very active in public communication, sort of the business community is not, is my view.
Right.
But there are good reasons why you are not, but I think those are not good enough reasons, let's say.
We should innovate.
Thank you.
So this is next year's panel. Then thank you very much, Hendrik, Emma, Roland and Bill. And that's this for now, and off to the next debate.
So we are off?
Just have a, yes,
Okay.
you're off.
Good, thank you.
So welcome to this final panel where we do nothing less than actually discuss the heart and soul of German industry with the German Trade and Climate Minister and Ole Källenius, the chairman of Mercedes-Benz. So I think we can get very much to the core of how Germany sees itself, but also projects into the world. And I got a quote from you, Mr. Källenius, in advance. So we're talking about how to get the job done, nothing less than actually the energy transition here in Germany. Ole Källenius says, to get the job done, we need a reliable framework conditions, speed, and the right mindset. Above all, we need full conviction that our strategy is right and the confidence and commitment that we will reach our goals. So my first question to you, Minister Habeck, is would you just sign up to that? Or what is the motto that you have basically in your office?
Well, completely. I would just sign it and move on to the work. Of course, you have to add that in an open democracy, in a liberal democracy, strategies and decisions made in the past are always questioned. Once again, this is the right of everyone. So the idea that all members of society, all political participants always agree on everything will never happen, not in an open democracy. But this is just a footnote to what you have just stated. And maybe the best part of the quote on Mr. Kalenius, from my point of view, is the attitude with which we are looking at the problems. And there are problems now at time. But if we just look at them and say, oh, big problems, oh, yeah, we look to another side, then we will lose. And if we say, okay, there's a problem, I solve it, then we will win.
I just want to quickly run through all the targets all of you actually definitely have to hit. The EU says climate neutral by 2050. The interim target is 55% emission reduction by 2030. Germany, a reduction by 65% by 2030 and climate neutral by 2045. The G20 say 75% of global greenhouse gas emissions, 80% of global GDP and 2/3 of global population. That's who the G20 are. They want to peak by 2025. All of these are targets that Germany, for instance, cannot be sure at this moment that it can reach. Is that correct?
No, that is not correct, actually. I think we could reach the targets, but of course our political targets or political plans or strategies or programs, whatever you want to say, are always interwoven in other spheres. They need to be financed, for example. So we have to get to this point, we have to mobilize an incredible amount of money. Of course, it's interwoven in the global competition situation. Right now, we see, due to the aggression from Vladimir Putin on Ukraine, still high energy prices, mainly high energy prices in all of the world, but mainly in Germany, because we had to buy the lacking gas on the world market for a higher price. So we have the special German or Central Europe problem. We see a shift away from an open, always friendly globalization to near or friendshoring, IRA. So you see, it's not only having a plan, but it had always to be adjusted. So we now, my conclusion is we have to move faster and we have to bring the energy prices down faster than ever thought, because they are higher than ever thought. Therefore, are political measures on the table, but they need money, of course. The money is not in line with the budget rules we have, and this creates a political problem. So, yes, we could be on track, we can solve it, but of course we have always adjust our strategies to the reality of the economic situation and the political sphere.
Ole Kalenius, how far along are you with your own company aim to get CO2 neutral by 2040? You're spending a lot of money on that. It's an open secret that the German car industry as a whole was very late to the game there. And how are you doing on scope 1, 2, and 3 of that process?
So if you look at the targets that you just mentioned, I'm going to start from the top with 2050, which is a world ambition, really. More or less all nations around the world have signed up to this ambition. And that is what we derived our company strategy from. So we came up with something a few years ago that we call Ambition 2039. So by the end of next decade, we want our business model to be CO2 neutral. And there we talk about the whole value chain, our suppliers, our own operations, obviously the product, the zero emission product, but also the product in use. And from 2019, when we communicated that would be a 20-year time frame. Sounds like a long time, but in the auto industry, that's just 3 product life cycles. So for us, actually not that long. Now, how far have we come? We have started measuring for everything that we sell, what would be the life cycle CO2 burden of that, calculating that a car would run about 200,000 kilometers. Mostly when it's a Mercedes, it's more. But to have some kind of a yardstick to measure it against. And what it looks like is that we peaked in 2020. So in terms of the overall CO2 burden life cycle from all of our products and the products in use, 2020 looked like our peak, and we're now slowly but safely walking down towards those types of targets. Is it going fast enough? Surely not. I mean, there's a level of impatience here. But in terms of capital allocation towards solving this problem, we're definitely putting our money where our mouth is. This year alone, we invest 15 billion euro in R&D, capital investment into our factories around the world and other things. And the lion's share of that goes into technologies that will decarbonize our product. But I want to emphasize, because you mentioned scope 1, 2, and 3. Scope 1, you could say it's easy. But once you get to 2 and 3, it's more difficult. Automotive is the ultimate team sport. We cannot do this without our supply partners, because so much of the CO2 burden, of course, happens outside of our company or afterwards when the product is in use. And we have now struck agreements with about 90% of our annual volume of buy, as they call it, to follow us on this path. And for many suppliers, we didn't need to wake them up. They were already going. But for some, it was a little bit of a moment for them to hear, okay, maybe I will not be in the sourcing set of Mercedes in the future. Not going to be cut right away, obviously. But if I don't come up with a plan, at some point, I will lose Mercedes as a customer. So we're trying to move the whole system together. And we are making progress, but I'm the first to admit it's a Herculean task. There are so many things left. But in terms of the mindset, we have the mindset that we can do it.
Okay, time here with you is very precious. We only have half an hour, but I still have the ambition to make this a collaborative conversation. So if there are questions in the room, also from your peers, please flag it up to me and I will bring you all into this conversation. How much of the challenges that you are being a bit unspecific about, because there are so many, I guess, are to do with supply chains?
I mean, a lot. If you think about it, we're replacing a technology that we have invented and then perfected for 130 years plus. Now, on the powertrain side, although there are so many technological revolutions going on at the same time, the digital and so on. But if we talk about the powertrain side, essentially our invention that changed the world is based upon burning fossil fuels. Now we have to replace the energy source with another energy source that is not fossil based. Hence, it's an electric drive. It's kind of given that it's electric no matter what non-fossil energy source you use. That is an enormous industrial footprint, and as you say, it's a new supply chain. And I just had the opportunity earlier today to take part in a panel with also Franziska Brandner from your department. Here it feels like we really have a team Germany, team Europe. Because we're working hand in hand in trying to lock up those supply chains. We need lithium, we need nickel, we need manganese, we need cobalt, we need other things. We need rare earths, etc., etc., etc. So we are in a very structured way throughout the whole supply chain and the whole world, mind you, mapping this and step by step putting in measures. And here I would like to thank Minister Habeck and his team for actively helping us doing this. I mean, it's our job to do it. We are the business. But here, politics and business are working hand in hand.
And this is, if I may add, something new. When I started the job, the big expectation was to combine climate action and economic growth. That's it, full stop. Now, then Russians' aggression on Ukraine, the war in Ukraine happened, and everyone was like in a shock. Oh, we have to not only to repair our supply chain that we learned by COVID-19, but we have to become sovereign, gain our sovereignty in matters of raw materials, for example. That was not on the table at the end of 2021. Of course, the concern, do we get enough raw materials, was always there. But the strategic decision being not dependent, let's face it, on one country and China is new. And of course, this increases higher costs. And now things become more complicated. So the plan, the energy transition plan, has not changed. But the combination with other problems has increased tremendously.
You mentioned China, and there actually are two issues that were partially also raised here. The German Chancellor was here yesterday, basically not being very keen on the investigation into electronic vehicles that were subsidized by China entering the EU market. Do you share that take on this?
Well, first of all, I'd like to add or start in this conference that both, if we look at from a rational point of view, China needs Europe and Germany in Europe, and Europe needs China and Germany in Europe needs China as a market and as a trading partner. This is the ration, and therefore we should work for a better level playing field. Let's call it like this. The politics are otherwise. We have learned that the globalization as known in the past 3 decades has now shifted. People talk about geopolitics, meaning that states are acting in the mindset of interest spheres, and interest spheres are power spheres, and if everything is getting wrong, then also military conflicts could arise. This is a development that deeply concerns me. So we have to do both, work together on a level playing field and not be naive, because the world in a way is changing. This is spoken in regard to raw materials and I don't know, digitalization and everything. The thing is, if in the legal practice is done to harm other economies, German economies, the German automotive economies, and we know it, we can't just look the other side. So to look into it and to find out if this practice is not in line with WTO rules is all right. And then the other side is always there. If this is to be found out, of course, we can try to come to speaking terms and not let, also from my perspective, the worst happen. A war on Texas, for example. This is nothing anyone with a clear mind, a sound mind would like to see. But look into the files, I think, is not wrong.
So specifically, you would want to see the outcome of that investigation, then decide where you stand on that?
To start an investigation, if the potential threat is there, I think it's all right, yes.
Okay. And there's another question on where you see the role of German trade policy in terms of fostering that transition. The German solar industry has had a very hard time in the past. It's currently having a very hard time with a sharp drop in prices. So are you planning a response there?
Well, we have done a question to the industry: are you interested or willing to invest in Germany to produce solar panels also here? And the answers were amazing. A lot of companies with a huge budget of gigawatt raised their hands. The problem is they wanted also a huge budget of subsidies to do that, and this we don't have. But I'm sure that we will identify an amount of concrete fine projects, meaning our plan, maybe some of you know, is to install 22 gigawatt solar every year until 2030. We will reach 12, maybe 13 this year. So coming from 5 to 13, this is something in just 1.5 years' time, but it's not the end. And even if everything is done right, and there are investors into solar industry in Germany that will maybe produce something like 5 gigawatt if we are lucky, so maybe 1/4 of it. So we need also solar panels from around the world, also from China. this is what I'm talking about. When I talk about energy security or sovereignty, it's not to produce everything on our soil. This would be completely nonsense. This is not independency. It's not decoupling. It's not a national economy, German money, German sellers, German buyers, and around us a big wall. This is, I don't know where this idea comes from. Sometimes I read it in the newspaper or I read comments, and it's really astonishing. This is not what I'm aiming to. It's that we get the competence in the critical industries, or hold the competence in the critical industries here in Europe and in Germany, so that we participate in a growing market, but participate in a way that we create something new. And the German solar panels that are now available are more effective, more energy effective than the Chinese ones. They are better in a way, but they are more costly, of course, as well, as Mercedes-Benz is also a premium product.
So are you planning a concrete package?
Yes.
Ole Klenis, how would you characterize the German trade policy in terms of, we just heard that these are very much case-by-case bases for supporting certain industries, and how satisfied is Mercedes with what it's getting out of it?
Let's take a look at our business model first. As a global automotive manufacturer, we have, of course, built up our footprint over many decades. So we have operations around the world. We build most of our cars that we sell in China. We build an overproportional amount of cars in Europe because this is our natural home. This is where the company was started. And we have very large operations in the United States and in other markets around the world as well. But at the same time, our business model is based upon free and open markets. So I'm going to start with the United States as an example. We and our esteemed colleagues from Munich are, I think, the biggest industrial exporters from the United States to both Europe and China. So any one disturbance in that relationship would severely impact our business. From Europe, we are exporting to the whole world, more than 150 markets, big exports to the big economies, United States and China, but everywhere. And we have started exporting out of China. So the Smart brand, which is now a joint venture with one of our Chinese partners, we are now selling the next generation Smart that we're building in China and here, and powertrains. So open markets with as little protectionism and trade barriers as possible is paramount for our business model. And that is why I very, very much agree and can underline that we would like to have a level playing field. There's not a doubt. We understand we're not naive. The world is it's a complicated place. But any and every move where the reaction would be, let's raise trade barriers just a little bit, and then maybe the other side does something, and so on and so forth, that is a slippery slope. Certainly for a company like ours, and I believe for German industry as a whole, there is this term Exportweltmeister. Yeah, there's a reason why we've been an export world champion for many decades. It's because of innovation, technology, the products, precision machines, all sorts of different things, great cars, what have you. So I think what we need to do is, in these last 5 or 6 years, where we see more tendencies of protectionism, and we could talk about the Inflation Reduction Act in that context as well. Europe, Germany needs to be a stabilizing force as much as possible, working against that. So I hope that one doesn't jump to conclusion too quickly. Next to the relationship with the two big economic regions, we need to build more relationships. And this is where I think particularly the German government inside the EU. These are trade negotiations that are done on an EU level. But here, Germany is a force for good. It's not Germany, as far as I'm informed, that is holding up Mercosur. It's rather than other players in the EU.
No, we're pushing actually.
Yeah, Germany is pushing this.
The green side.
Reaching out to India, reaching out to Indonesia. We traveled together to Australia. I mean, it's a friendly, good country that we've had business relationships forever and a day. But now we need a more deeper relationship on the raw material side. We struck deals in Canada, Chile, etc., Africa. So we see a lot of activity. there's the complication of getting everybody in the EU on board. And I'm glad I'm a business person, I'm not a politician, because I'm sure that's not an easy task. But at the same time, I think we need to keep our foot on the gas here. So keep on pushing, because if we want to diversify, maybe reduce reliance on individual markets, well, we have to have more markets then, right? And we are going to do our utmost to exploit any market that we're in. But through trade agreements, if market barriers get reduced, it will open up a bigger opportunity for us. So here I can only encourage the job that has started but has not yet been finished.
Is that a precondition, or does it accelerate the energy transition within your company?
I would say it accelerates the energy transition. We are going to have to spend, just as one individual company, many, many tens of billions of euros to get this done. If that money is not lost in inefficiencies, and a trade barrier is essentially for a business an inefficiency, that capital then gets free to be allocated to something sensible, which is innovation, technology, building new industrial capacity, etc. So let's never forget that capital finds return on investment, and if you lower if you increase the risk and you burden the business case with higher factor cost, you're going to have less economic activity. It's that simple.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Also? Yes, I understand, of course, the sense of trade barrier and what you are pointing to and meaning, but isn't a secret subsidy in a supportive state with a hidden agenda a jurisdiction that is prohibiting access to markets also a trade barrier? So you see where I'm pointing to. Of course, in a romantic, idealistic world, I completely agree. But how long are we looking the other way when we know, or at least think, that illegal practice is protecting a market?
So let me then describe my impression. But let's look in both directions, east and west. Yes, it is absolutely true that to 99% every economic activity that Mercedes does in Germany, through our own earned cash flow, we pay for ourselves and invest. That is the way business should work, and politics provides a framework. So quite seldom do we go to you and say, could you please be a venture capital investor, and by the way, you're not going to get your money back. Seldom we do this, but we do this in Europe as well. And we are thankful for the build-up of our new, hopefully European battery champion, ACC, that we're doing together with Stellantis and Total, that the EU so far has granted this consortium around 1.2 billion euro in grants. So in essence, Europe is giving us, I mean, we could do it probably without that money, but it improves our competitiveness. Now I go to China and I watch what has happened there over the last 20 or so years. So you have 130 companies selling battery electric vehicles in China. It's far too many. The competition is Darwinistic. In the volume entry segment, there is a price war. For many of those companies, I would say it's more likely than not that provinces that wanted to create jobs, have a sense of pride, etc., primarily in competition with each other, because for the first 15 years it was not obvious at all that any one of these Chinese would be able to go global, but now they're trying. They were in competition with each other. So province 1 against province 2, province 3, and I am absolutely sure that they have gifted some of the investment, like the example I made with ACC, and I'm sure that they have received capital with very little interest, perhaps no interest. And by the way, what I know of Tesla's investment in Shanghai, they have enjoyed the same. It's not a Chinese company, it's a foreign company, and they are exporting those vehicles to Europe on top of the ones that they make here. We have not received perhaps as much subsidies. Now, we were an early mover in China, and you went into joint venture. So in another way, you could say, because we share the investments, the state-owned enterprise that we're operating with, they pay for half the investment, we pay for half the investment. They get a return, we get a return. But it is probably likely that we as a venture have received less subsidies than maybe some of these startups. In the United States, because this is important now, with the Inflation Reduction Act, if we were an American company and we had a fully industrialized, non-export based relationship with the United States, which we don't, if we had to do that, we would have to close a couple of plants in Germany and build new plants in the United States. We don't have it. It's completely unrealistic. It's politically unrealistic. It's also economically, in the short term, unrealistic. Now, we're going to take advantage of the IRA as much as we can, but we will make some benefit from that. Without naming any names, if I were an American startup selling 600,000 cars in the United States, getting the full $7,500 plus the $4,500 on the purchasing side, the American taxpayer would hand me $7 billion or more every single year. I don't think we're going to get that from Christian Lindner. How are we going to react to that? So I am acutely aware of the imperfections of this direct or indirect protectionism. But if Europe's answer would be, and I'm not saying that it is, that we raise a barrier to negate that advantage, it's going to hurt us more than it's going to help us. So if you do anything, I don't think it is affordable, is you put the same amount of money for the players that do business in Europe. Then it would actually not hurt us, it would help us. I don't think it's politically possible. I think Europe can afford it, but whatever can be done, that's what I would do. And that is why I am worried that such investigations could lead to a tit for tat, and it will be a net minus for us.
So are you still in favor of that investigation? And
well, we had the discussion before, and of course the threat is there, and especially there for German automotive industry. It's not the other automotive producing countries in Europe don't have the same importance on the Chinese markets. So of course, and you know how Europe, or at least you have a feeling how Europe works, it's always interest-raised politics there. So I see the problem. But still, on the other hand, I mean, there are different ways to find to work with the result of such an inquiry. So yes, I think we have to know and to understand how the system in China and the US works. And while we made the same complaint when IRA started, I talked with Secretary Yellen the other day, and we said this is not in line with WTO. And then we worked on different ways to create bridges. I think it's still not in line with WTO, but there are found, or at least are in the making, ways that European car industry, battery industry, and so is not completely excluded. This is not now because I think the truth everyone knows is that the IRA was not directed against Europe. They just forgot about us. And that is a problem. This is telling the story of the globalized world right now. But so they want to help. I'm not so sure that this is the case with China. I think they know exactly what they are doing. And if we say, well, this is maybe not in line with WTO, they won't say, oh, thanks for telling us, we change it now. But still there are various options then on the table to deal with the problem.
Minister Habeck, Ole Kalinius, thank you very much for what was a very frank discussion there. And just one final yes or no question, because asked a few days ago, you just cut out your work as supporting to compensate also for disadvantages that industries have. There's a huge debate here in Germany about a discount for industrial energy. You said it was a 50-50 chance. What are the chances right now as you walk out of the store today?
Yeah, it's 50-50 still.
Okay, just checking in with you.
But you can't, a 50-50 answer is never a yes or no. See? Yeah. That was clever of me, wasn't it?
Even though we're not one of the companies that would be a benefactor, our suppliers would. So if you can turn that to a 51-49, that would be good.
Yes. Well, we have to come for a conclusion for better or worse. But now, I mean, this is now. I made the proposal in May. Now we have September is nearly over. When we're complaining about decision-making, bureaucracy in Brussels and in Berlin, and so this is too long a period for a decision. So could be. I hope for a yes, could also be a no, but no decision is always the worst.
Okay, thank you very much for that discussion. And herzlichen Dank Ihnen. Dankeschön. Thank you so much. Und jetzt zurück zu Lars-Hendrik Röller. Yeah.
Okay, let me close it, and let me also thank again the minister. I think it was a very, very interesting discussion at the end, and also thank to Ola Källenius. So let me just close it and tell you that I think I'm very happy with the summit. I think we sort of fulfilled our mission, which was a dialogue. And my team wrote down a few highlights, which is, I think, I don't want to bore you with all of those, and some quotes, maybe just one or two from. I restrict myself to the heads of states. I think President Michel, the 21st century will be green and digital. I think that was interesting. Olaf Scholz, of course, with his view of the multipolar world, which we have discussed many times, and I think it also linked to what the discussion was right now. And it was very interesting, at least for me, because of this sort of dumping and China issues, there are always these two different views. It was also very interesting to hear Ola Källenius. And I think the view of business is very important here, by the way, because these tit-for-tat possibilities and escalations is something tricky, and I think the voice of relates to the communication part of it. I think the voice of business need to be heard. So I think that was very interesting also to hear the Chancellor, including the discussion on Africa. Sri Lanka, begging is the wrong word, but very confidently asking for 2024 is sort of the year of decision making on the reform of the international financial systems. The MDBs, I think the World Bank IMF meetings are coming up, right? They're mounting very soon. So I think that's a huge issue, nothing new, and you also said it, but it's really something the world needs to get going, and I think was Sri Lanka's message as well, in addition to other things. Edi Rama, I think, was Edi Rama, just think he's a great person. If you don't have weapons, you need humor, is what he said, and I thought that was great. Also said new technologies are a blessing for the developing world as they are allowing us to leapfrog. It relates also to the discussion we had on AI, where I thought the intervention from the African colleague was very pertinent. Is it helping or hurting the poor? I think that's... and then just the only other head of state is Larry Fink with his hope idea. And I think this is very important also. I think he's right with China. I think trust, confidence, consumer spending is a big part of the economy. And I think that, projecting that position of hope is a very important one. But politicians are usually very good at that. Maybe at least they're trying to project hope because they know it's also good for the economy. But I think generally we should look at the positive side of things and not the fear. I want to close with one sentence because it's very nice, and then I have one other thing to do, one important thing to do. One sentence which from Michel, who wrote to me, texted to me, the President Michel, he was super happy and he thought that was a great format, and especially the dialogue. And he, quote from him, maybe we should put that in our whatever we do after this. I don't know, report or something, or internet. I promise. Now I have to read my reading here. I promise
I will not give a speech. This is a dialogue, is what he said. And I thought that sums it up very well. I want to thank all of you, but before I thank all of you and ask you for a beer or wine outside, there's a barbecue. The weather seems to be holding up. I want to do one important thing. The very tired people you see up there, my team, I asked them to be here. We're not a lot, and I want to basically ask them to stand up. There's Katrina, there's Sven, there's Felix, there's Anna, Paulina, Charlotte.